I don't know if anyone will believe this. I'm not even sure I believe it, and I lived through it. I'm writing this from a dingy motel room 1,000 miles away from my hometown, and I can't sleep. Every time I close my eyes, I see it. The way it moved, the way it sounded. I need to get this out. I need to tell someone, even if it's just strangers on the internet. Maybe I'm crazy. God, I hope I'm crazy. My hometown is a place called Havenwood. It's a small, isolated town in the thick of the Canadian wilderness. You won't find it on most maps. It's the kind of place people are from, not a place people go to. We're surrounded by miles of dense, unforgiving forest. The kind of forest that swallows sound and light. Growing up, the woods were our playground and our boogeyman. There were unspoken rules in Havenwood, quirks you absorbed through osmosis. The most obvious one was the shutters. Every single house, from the rickety old farmhouses on the outskirts to the newer builds in the small subdivision, had them. And I'm not talking about those decorative plastic things you see in the suburbs. These were heavy solid wood or steel shutters, bolted directly to the window frames. And they all had one peculiar feature. The latches were on the outside. Think about that for a second. The locks were on the outside. As a kid, it was just a fact of life. At dusk, you'd hear it all over town. A symphony of scrapes and clicks as people went outside to latch their neighbors' shutters closed. It was a community ritual. You'd secure the house next door, and they'd secure yours. It was just what was done. No one ever talked about why. If a kid asked, they'd get a vague, dismissive answer. Keeps the drafts out. For the winter storms lies, all of them. A flimsy excuse for a ritual that was bone deep. The other rule, the one that really mattered, was what I've come to call the 20-minute rule. It was never written down, never explicitly taught, but every single person in Havenwood knew it. If you found yourself outside after the sun had fully set, after the last sliver of orange had bled from the horizon, you had 20 minutes. 20 minutes to get inside. Any inside. A house, a car, the town's tiny library, the back room of the general store. It didn't matter where, as long as it was a box with 4 walls and a roof. If you couldn't make it home, you went to the nearest door and knocked. No one, and I mean no one, would ever refuse you. They'd let you in, lock the door behind you, and you'd stay there until sunrise. No questions asked. It was a sacred law. I never thought much about it. It was just the rhythm of life in a strange little town. You learn to watch the sun. You develop an internal clock that's tied to the angle of the light. You know instinctively when it's time to head home. The anxiety starts as a low hum in your chest when the shadows start to lengthen. I moved away for college when I was 18. Went to a big city, got a degree, a job, a life. For 10 years, Havenwood was just a collection of weird memories I'd occasionally trot out at parties to seem interesting. Yeah, in my hometown, we locked each other's windows from the outside. It always got a laugh. I laughed along with them. It all seemed so silly and rustic from a distance. Then my mom got sick. I got the call from her neighbor, Mrs. Gable. It was cancer, and it was aggressive. I packed a bag, put my life on hold, and drove the 12 hours back to the place I'd spent a decade trying to forget. The first few weeks were a blur of hospital visits, pharmacist runs, and cooking bland, soft meals for my mom. Havenwood was exactly as I'd left it, trapped in amber. The same peeling paint on the general store, the same potholes in the road, the same heavy shutters on every window. The rhythm of the town pulled me back in without my even noticing. I found myself watching the sun, my heart rate picking up as the afternoon light turned golden. I'd make sure I was home, the doors locked before the last light faded. Old habits. My mom was weak, but her mind was sharp. One evening, as I was helping her with her medication, she looked at me with an intensity that startled me. Her voice was a dry whisper. "You're being careful, right, Michael?" "Of course, Mom. I'm giving you the right doses. No," she interrupted, her grip on my arm surprisingly strong. "The evenings, you're watching the sun." The question was so jarring, so out of place in a sickroom conversation about palliative care. I didn't know what to say. "Yeah, Mom. I'm getting home in time." She held my gaze for a long moment, then seemed to deflate, sinking back into her pillows. "Good," she murmured. "That's good. Don't get caught out. Not now. It's been active lately." Active? What the hell did that mean? I wanted to ask, to press her for a real answer for the first time in my life. But she was already drifting off to sleep, exhausted. The conversation unsettled me more than I wanted to admit. It was the first time an adult had ever acknowledged the rules, had ever hinted that they were for something real. A week later, I had to drive to the next town over, about an hour away, to pick up a special prescription for her. It was a dreary, overcast day, the kind where the sky is a solid, featureless gray, and it's impossible to tell what time it is without a watch. I got the medicine and started back. The road to Havenwood is a winding 2-lane strip of asphalt that cuts through an ocean of pine and birch. Cell service is a joke out there. It's just you, your car, and the trees. So many trees. They press in on the road, their branches hanging low, creating a tunnel of green and brown. I was maybe 25 minutes out of town when it happened. A loud bang, followed by the sickening whump, whump, whump of a flat tire. "You have got to be kidding me," I said to the empty car. I pulled over to the gravel shoulder. The silence that rushed in when I killed the engine was absolute. No birds, no insects, just the faint whisper of the wind through the pines. I got out and looked. The rear passenger side tire was completely shredded. Not just a puncture, but a blowout. Okay, no problem. I knew how to change a tire. It was an inconvenience, not a catastrophe. I opened the trunk and pulled out the spare and the jack. I was working the lug nuts, grunting with effort, when I first noticed the light was changing. The uniform gray of the sky was darkening, shifting to a bruised purple at the western horizon. A cold knot of dread formed in my stomach. It was primal, instinctual. The feeling every Havenwood kid gets when they realize they've misjudged the time. I started working faster, my hands clumsy and slick with sweat. The lug nuts were on too tight. I put my whole body into it, my shoulders screaming in protest. The air was getting colder, the kind of damp chill that seeps into your bones. The shadows of the trees stretched across the road, long skeletal fingers reaching for my car. I finally got the flat tire off and was wrestling the spare into place when I heard it. It started on the car radio. I'd left the key in the ignition, and the radio was on, tuned to Havenwood's local station. It was the only one that came in this far out. Normally it played a mix of classic rock and local ads, but this wasn't music. It was a sound, a low, monotonous, wavering tone. It sounded like a siren, maybe. But it was organic, almost biological, like the call of some immense deep-sea creature. It was a single sustained note that seemed to vibrate in my teeth. It made the hairs on my arms stand up. The sound was coming from the radio, but it felt like it was coming from everywhere at once, from the trees, from the sky. I froze, the spare tire halfway onto the bolts, my hands numb. I listened to that awful, mesmerizing hum for what felt like an eternity. It went on and on, unwavering. Then, as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. The silence that followed was somehow louder, more terrifying. For a few seconds, there was just static. Then a voice came on the radio. It was the town's announcer, a guy named Graham Whitaker. I'd known him my whole life. He had a folksy, reassuring voice, the kind of voice you'd associate with bake sale announcements and lost dog reports. But now, his voice was tight, strained, stripped of all its warmth. He said only 2 words. "It's out." Then the static returned. My blood ran cold. The tire, the car, my sick mother. It all vanished. My world narrowed to those 2 words and the suffocating silence that followed. "It's out." A switch flipped in my brain. The instincts of a lifetime took over. 20 minutes. My watch. I fumbled for my phone. The screen was black. Dead battery. Of course. I looked at the sky. The last hint of purple was gone. It was full dark. The kind of oppressive ink-black dark you only get in the middle of nowhere. How long had I been out here? How long since the sun had officially set? 5 minutes? 10? My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I abandoned the tire. I scrambled into the driver's seat and slammed the door. I locked it. I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking so badly I could barely fit them into the ignition. The engine turned over. I didn't care about the rim. I didn't care about the car. I had to move. I had to get to town. I slammed the car into drive and hit the gas. The car lurched forward, the bare rim grinding horribly against the asphalt. Sparks flew. The car pulled hard to the right and the steering wheel shuddered in my hands, but I didn't care. I was moving. 15, maybe 20 miles an hour. It was agonizingly slow. The headlights cut a pathetic yellow swath through the darkness, illuminating nothing but the endless tunnel of trees. Every shadow seemed to writhe. Every gust of wind sounded like a footstep. My eyes darted from the road to the rearview mirror to the passenger side window, searching the impenetrable wall of blackness that pressed in on all sides. It's out. What was it? I realized with a jolt that in 30 years I had never heard anyone in Havenwood name it. It was always just a pronoun, an implication, something understood but never spoken. I'd been driving for maybe 5 minutes, the horrible grinding sound of the rim my only companion, when I saw something. It was at the edge of my headlights, just where the light gave way to shadow. A flicker of movement. I slowed down, my foot hovering over the brake. My first thought was, deer. The woods were full of them, but it wasn't a deer. It stepped out from between 2 thick pine trees into the full glare of the headlights. And my mind just broke. It stopped processing what I was seeing. The part of my brain responsible for rational thought just threw up its hands and walked out. It was tall, impossibly, unnaturally tall. It had to be at least 9 feet, maybe 10, and it was thin. So thin it looked like a bundle of sticks wrapped in pale, leathery skin. Its limbs were long and spindly, bent at angles that seemed wrong, inhuman. It was standing on its 2 hind legs, but it was hunched over, its long arms dangling nearly to the ground. It had no discernible features, no face, no clothes, just a smooth, pale expanse of skin where a face should be. But the worst part, the part that has been playing on a loop in my head ever since, was the way it moved. It didn't walk. It jittered. It moved in a series of short, sharp, unnatural jerks, like it was a character in an old film, and someone had cut out a few frames between each movement. It would be perfectly still, then it would be 3 feet to the left, with no discernible motion in between. A stutter in reality, a glitch in the world. My car was still rolling forward, slowly. I was maybe 50 feet away from it. It stood there in the middle of the road, its long, skeletal frame bathed in the yellow light of my headlights. It didn't seem to notice the car. Its head, or the smooth ball of flesh where its head should be, was tilted, as if listening to something I couldn't hear. I was paralyzed. My foot was frozen on the gas pedal. My hands were welded to the steering wheel. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. All I could do was stare at this impossible thing that stood in the road. Then, it turned its head towards me. The smooth, featureless face was pointed directly at my car, and I knew, with a certainty that went deeper than thought, that it saw me. I need to be clear. It didn't have eyes, but it saw me. And then it started to move again, not towards me, but alongside the car, keeping pace with it. It stayed just at the edge of the woods, its jerky, frame-skipping movements making it appear and disappear between the trees. 1 second it was there, a pale nightmare. The next, it was gone. Then it was 20 feet further down the road, perfectly still, its head tilted. It wasn't running. It was just there, keeping pace with my crippled car. And then it did something that shattered the last remnants of my sanity. It spoke, but the sound didn't come from the creature itself. It came from inside my car. It came from the radio. The static on the radio crackled and a voice said, "Michael, is that you, honey?" It was my mother's voice, not just her voice, her inflection, the specific, weary way she said my name. It was a perfect imitation. A recording couldn't have been more accurate. "Michael, I need some help with the groceries. The bags are so heavy. Can you come give me a hand?" I slammed on the brakes. The car skidded on the gravel, the grinding of the rim a scream in the night. I stared at the radio, then at the woods. The thing was standing there between two trees, motionless, watching me. The voice on the radio continued, sweet and motherly. "Don't just sit there in the car, honey. It's cold out. Come on inside." This wasn't happening. This could not be happening. My mom was at home, sedated, barely able to speak. She wasn't here. She wasn't on the radio. My mind was a whirlwind of terror and confusion. How could it know her voice? How could it know my name? Was it reading my mind? Was it a hallucination? Was I having a psychotic break on the side of a deserted road? "I made your favorite," the voice on the radio chirped, a little more insistent now. "Pot roast. Come on, Michael, it'll get cold." My stomach churned. It was trying to lure me out. That's what this was. A trap. A horribly personally tailored trap. I floored the gas pedal. The engine roared, the car fishtailed, and I wrestled with the wheel, trying to keep it on the road. I had to get away. I had to get to town. The thing in the woods kept pace. It flickered between the trees, a pale specter in the corner of my eye, and the voice on the radio kept talking. It cycled through different voices. People I knew. "Hey man, you coming to the game?" It was the voice of my best friend from high school, a guy I hadn't seen in 10 years. His exact tone, the slang we used to use. "Mr. Peterson, you have an overdue book," said the voice of the town librarian, a woman who had died 5 years ago. It was a chorus of ghosts, a phantom symphony playing through the single speaker of my car radio. Each voice was a perfect replica, a memory dragged out of my head and twisted into a weapon. It was a violation. It felt like it was peeling back my skull and rummaging through my brain. I was screaming. I didn't even realize it at first, but I was just screaming. A raw, wordless sound of pure terror. I clawed at the radio, trying to turn it off, but the knob just spun uselessly in my hand. Then it was my mom's voice again, but it was different this time. It wasn't the sweet, cajoling voice from before. It was weak, frightened. "Michael? Help me. I fell. I can't get up. Please, honey, I'm scared. It's dark." A sob caught in my throat. It was so real. It sounded exactly like her. Exactly like the frail, scared woman I had been taking care of for weeks. For a split second, a sliver of doubt pierced through my terror. What if it was real? What if something was wrong at home, and the radio was somehow picking up a signal? But then I looked at the woods. The thing was standing there, its featureless face aimed at me. And I knew. "Please, Michael." The voice on the radio whimpered. "It hurts. Where are you?" "Shut up," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "Shut up. Shut up. You're not her." I was getting closer to town. I could see the first faint glow of streetlights over the crest of the next hill. It felt like an eternity away. The car was shaking violently. The grinding sound was deafening. I didn't know if it would make it. The thing in the woods seemed to sense it too. It was getting more agitated. Its movements became quicker, more frantic. It was no longer just keeping pace. It was darting ahead, appearing and disappearing closer and closer to the road. The voices from the radio grew more desperate. A cacophony of pleas and demands from my past and present, all begging me to stop, to get out of the car. They were overlapping now, a meaningless, terrifying wall of sound. Then silence. The radio went dead. The only sound was the grinding of the rim and my own ragged breathing. I dared to glance to my right. It was right there. Standing on the shoulder of the road, not 10 feet from my passenger window. For the first time, I could see it clearly in the headlights. The skin was pale, but it was also translucent, like parchment. I could see the dark, stringy outlines of muscle and bone underneath. Its joints were swollen and knob-like, like the knots on an old tree. And the smooth plate of its face, it wasn't entirely smooth. There were faint, shallow indentations where eyes and a mouth should be, like a clay sculpture that an artist had started to form but then smoothed over, erasing the features. We were so close I could have reached out and touched it. My entire body went rigid. I stared at it and it stared back with its non-eyes. And in that moment, I felt a wave of something that wasn't just fear. It was a profound, soul-crushing sense of wrongness. This thing did not belong in our world. It was a tear in the fabric of reality, a walking, breathing contradiction. Then it did the last thing I ever expected. It raised one of its long, spindly arms. Its 3-fingered hand, with claws like black thorns, uncurled slowly. It reached for the car. It didn't tap on the glass. It didn't try to open the door. It laid its palm flat against the passenger window. There was no sound. But the glass bowed inward. It flexed, creaking under a pressure that should have shattered it instantly. I could see the glass distorting, the reflection of the dashboard warping around the pale shape of its hand. That's what finally broke my paralysis. I yanked the steering wheel hard to the left, swerving into the other lane. The thing didn't flinch. Its hand remained on the glass as the car moved, its arm stretching, elongating like taffy, refusing to let go. I screamed and swerved back to the right, fishtailing wildly. The car slammed back onto the shoulder and the creature's hand finally slipped off the glass. I saw the lights of Havenwood. I was there. I was at the edge of town. The creature stood in the middle of the road behind me, a tall, skeletal silhouette in my rearview mirror. It didn't follow me into the town. It just stood there, watching me go. I didn't slow down. I ran the stop sign at the town line, the car screaming in protest. I headed straight for my mother's house. As I drove through the silent streets, I saw that every single house was dark. Every window was covered by its heavy latched shutter. The town was a fortress, a collection of tiny sealed boxes hiding from the night. I skidded to a halt in my mother's driveway, the bare rim digging a deep gouge in the gravel. I half fell out of the car and scrambled to the front door, fumbling with my keys. My hands were shaking so violently it took me 3 tries to get the key in the lock. I threw the door open, slammed it shut behind me, and shot the deadbolt. I leaned against the door, my body trembling, gasping for air. I was inside. I was safe. The house was quiet. A small lamp was on in the living room, casting a warm, gentle glow. It was an island of sanity in an ocean of madness. "Mom!" I called out, my voice hoarse. There was no answer. A new, sharper fear cut through the adrenaline. I ran to her bedroom. The door was ajar. She was in her bed, sleeping. Her breathing was shallow but steady. I stood in the doorway for a full minute, just watching the gentle rise and fall of her chest. She was fine. She was here. She hadn't been on the radio. She hadn't been on the side of the road. Relief washed over me so powerfully my knees buckled. I slid down the doorframe to the floor, my head in my hands, and I started to cry. I cried out of fear, out of relief, out of sheer, unadulterated confusion. I don't know how long I sat there. Eventually, the adrenaline faded, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion and a gnawing, terrible dread. I went around the house and checked every window. My mother's neighbor, Mrs. Gable, had been diligent. Every shutter was closed and latched from the outside. The house was sealed tight. I couldn't sleep. I sat in the living room in the dark, staring at the shuttered windows, listening to the silence. I kept thinking about the 20-minute rule. I had made it, but just barely. What if I hadn't? What would have happened if that thing had gotten its hand through the glass? What would it have done to me? And how did it know my mother's voice? How did it know my name? The only explanation I could think of was that it wasn't just a monster. It was a parasite, a psychic parasite that fed on memory, on emotion. It used your own mind against you. It found what you loved, what you feared, and it wore it like a mask. The next morning, the sun came up, and the world seemed to return to normal. I heard the familiar scrape and click of Mrs. Gable unlatching our shutters. The town slowly came back to life. But for me, nothing would ever be normal again. The world had a new, terrible shape. I looked at my car in the daylight. The tire was destroyed, the rim a mangled piece of metal. But that's not what I was looking at. I went to the passenger side window, and there on the glass was a handprint. It was faint, like a greasy smudge, but it was undeniably there. It was too long to be human, with 3 slender fingers and a thumb. It was a perfect, physical piece of evidence that my nightmare had been real. I knew I couldn't stay. I couldn't live in a place where that thing was in the woods waiting for the sun to go down. I couldn't live with the constant low-grade terror, watching the light fade every single day. I told my mom I had an emergency at work. I packed my bags while she slept. I wrote a note to Mrs. Gable, begging her to continue looking after my mom, and I emptied my bank account, leaving all the cash for her care. I called a tow truck from the next town over. I didn't want to talk to anyone from Havenwood. I couldn't look them in the eye, knowing what I knew. Knowing that they all lived with this secret, this terrible accommodation they had made with the darkness. As I was waiting for the tow truck, I saw the town sheriff, a man named Callahan, pull up. He was a big, quiet man I'd known my whole life. He got out of his car and walked over to me, his face unreadable. He looked at my car, at the mangled rim, then at me. "Heard you had some car trouble last night," he said, his voice low. "Yeah, a blowout." I couldn't meet his eyes. He nodded slowly. "You were out late." It wasn't a question. It was a statement, an accusation. "I got delayed," I said lamely. Callahan was quiet for a long moment. He looked off towards the woods, his jaw tight. "You were lucky," he said. So quietly I almost didn't hear him. "Next time you might not be. Some things you don't test them. You just do what you're told." He looked at my packed bags in the back seat of my car. He knew I was leaving. He didn't try to stop me. He just gave a small, sad nod. "Probably for the best," he said. And then he got back in his car and drove away. That was it. That was my goodbye to Havenwood. I'm in this motel now. The tow truck dropped my car at a garage a few towns over, and I took a bus as far away as I could get. I keep the curtains drawn tight in my room even during the day. I flinch at every unexpected noise. I can't stop thinking about it, about the rules. The shutters latched from the outside. They aren't to keep something out. They're to keep you in, to stop you from opening the door, no matter what you hear, no matter whose voice is begging you to help them. And the 20-minute rule, I think I understand it now. It's not about finding just any shelter. It's about getting inside before it finds you, before it gets your scent, before it can lock onto you. Once it knows you're out there, once it has a taste of your memories, it can tailor the hunt. It can become your mother, your friend, your deepest regret. How many people didn't make it? How many doors were knocked on, with a familiar voice on the other side begging to be let in? How many people fell for the trick? I'm 1,000 miles away, but I don't feel safe. I feel like it knows me now. Like a part of it is hooked into my brain. Sometimes when it's quiet, I think I can hear it. A faint, monotonous hum in the back of my mind. And sometimes, in the dead of night, I'll hear a voice, just a whisper, from the other side of the motel room door. My mother, asking me to let her in. I don't know what to do. I can't go back. I can't go home. All I can do is keep running. And pray that the sun comes up. Story 2. I guess I should start by saying I'm a pretty boring guy. I'm 32. I work from home as a user interface designer, and my biggest excitement for the week is usually finding out a new season of a show I like just dropped. I moved into this house 6 months ago. It's a modest little place in a quiet, leafy suburb. The kind of place where you hear lawn mowers more than arguments. The houses are close enough to borrow a cup of sugar, but separated by tall wooden fences that give everyone their privacy. My backyard, my little square of sanctuary, is bordered on 3 sides by these fences. And on one side lives Mr. Weatherby and his dog. I've never had a real conversation with Mr. Weatherby. I've seen him, of course. He's a small, wispy man who looks like a strong gust of wind might carry him away. Gray hair that's more like fluff, bifocal glasses that are always a little crooked, and a permanent slump in his shoulders. He wears the same rotation of beige cardigans and pleated trousers, even when it's hot out. He puts around his yard sometimes, pulling at a weed here and there, but he never seems to enjoy it. It's more like a chore he's compelled to perform. He never makes eye contact. If I'm out on my deck and he comes outside, he'll immediately turn around and go back in. I figured he was just a private, perhaps shy old man. Then there's the dog. Cromwell, I think he called it once. I heard him say the name in a low, almost pleading tone when the dog was standing motionless by the back door. Cromwell is substantial. He's a mastiff, or some kind of mix that has a lot of mastiff in it. He is enormous, a solid block of muscle and wrinkled flesh the color of old leather. His head is the size of a cinder block and his jowls hang low, hiding a mouth that I can only imagine is cavernous. But here's the first weird thing, the thing that pricked at the back of my mind from day one. Cromwell never barks, ever. I have never heard a single yip, woof, or howl come from that yard. We have a guy who delivers packages and practically throws them at the front doors. We have squirrels that wage constant war on the bird feeders. We have other dogs in the neighborhood that go into a frenzy over the slightest provocation. Cromwell remains silent. He doesn't make no noise, though. Sometimes when he's lying in the sun near the fence, I can feel a sound more than hear it. It's a low, guttural rumble that seems to vibrate right through the ground and up the legs of my deck chair. It's not a growl of aggression. It's deeper, more resonant. It sounds like a large engine idling, or the far-off rumble of a coming earthquake. It is the most primal, unsettling sound I've ever heard from a living creature. It's the sound of immense, dormant power. The second weird thing is his diet. Mr. Weatherby feeds Cromwell exclusively raw meat, and I mean a lot of it. Twice a week, like clockwork, a plain, unmarked white van pulls up to Weatherby's house in the evening. The driver, a stocky guy who also avoids eye contact, will unload 2 or 3 enormous black plastic bags, the kind contractors use for demolition waste. They're clearly heavy. The driver has to heave them onto a little dolly to wheel them up to the door. Mr. Weatherby will scurry out, hand over a cash envelope, and quickly drag the bags inside. For a while, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe Weatherby is a butcher and these are scraps. Maybe he's part of some raw food co-op for dog owners. People are weird about their pets. But the sheer volume was staggering. We're talking what must be 50 to 60 pounds of meat twice a week for one dog. I see the feeding sometimes through the slats in the fence. Weatherby doesn't use a bowl. He just opens the back door, drags one of the black bags out onto his small concrete patio, slits it open with a utility knife, and lets Cromwell go at it. The dog eats with a silent, methodical intensity. There's no frantic gulping or growling. Just the soft, wet tearing of flesh and the dull crack of bone. Mr. Weatherby stands off to the side, wringing his hands, watching. He always looks terrified. He looks at the dog the way a bomb disposal expert might look at a ticking package. I've been telling myself it's all just eccentric. A lonely old man, a giant, silent dog, a strange diet. This is a weird world and I'm just a boring guy who overthinks things. That's what I told myself. Until last night. Last night something broke. Something shifted and now the world doesn't feel right anymore. Now I can't stop looking at the fence. I can't stop listening for that low, ground-shaking rumble. And I can't get the image out of my head. The image of Mr. Weatherby, his face pale in the moonlight, his hands clasped together, watching that thing. It was around 2 a.m. I couldn't sleep. One of those nights where your brain just won't shut off. I was standing in my kitchen, looking out the window into my backyard. A full moon was out, washing everything in that silvery, sterile light that makes the world look like a photograph from another planet. I saw movement next door. It was feeding time, which was unusual. It was always an evening thing. I saw the back door slide open and the familiar stooped silhouette of Mr. Weatherby emerged, dragging one of the heavy black bags. He sliced it open, and the hulking shape of Cromwell moved into the moonlight. The dog began to eat, but something was different. The rumble was louder tonight, more insistent. It felt like it was coming from inside my own chest. And Mr. Weatherby, his posture was different. He wasn't just standing there, wringing his hands. He was on his knees. At first I thought he'd fallen, that he'd had a heart attack or something. I felt a jolt of alarm, my hand reaching for my phone to call 911. But then he moved. He wasn't hurt. He was prostrating himself. He was on his hands and knees, his head bowed low to the ground, facing the feeding animal. His shoulders were shaking. I couldn't hear it through the glass, but I knew with a sudden, sickening certainty that he was crying or whimpering. I watched, frozen, for what felt like an hour. The giant dog ate, and the small man knelt. The moonlight painted the scene in stark, nightmarish detail. The contrast was grotesque. The massive, powerful creature and the frail, supplicant man. When the dog was finished, it did something I'd never seen before. It didn't just go back inside. It turned its huge head and looked not at Weatherby, but at the empty bag and the mess of blood and viscera on the patio. It let out that deep, subterranean rumble. But it was different this time. It wasn't idle. It was a command. And Mr. Weatherby, on his hands and knees, began to clean it up. He crawled forward, his movements jerky and pathetic. He used his bare hands to push the bloody remnants back into the bag. He was like a servant, a slave, cleaning up after his master's feast. I don't know what any of this means. I don't know what I saw, but I'm looking at the fence right now, and the sun is setting, and I am filled with a cold, crawling dread that I have never known in my life. It feels like I've peeked behind a curtain I wasn't supposed to, and I saw a truth about the world that I can't unsee. The man isn't the master in that house. It's been 3 days since I wrote the first part of this. I didn't know if I'd write more. Part of me wanted to just delete it, to pretend I'd had a nightmare or a waking dream. To go back to my boring life where the weirdest thing in my day was a software bug. But I can't. The curtain's been pulled back, and even when I shut my eyes, I can still see what's on the stage. Thank you for the comments and messages. To answer the most common question, no, I have not called the police or animal control. What would I say? My neighbor was cleaning up a mess on his hands and knees while his dog watched. They'd think I was crazy or a crank. They'd come, talk to the harmless-looking old man, see the big but otherwise normal-looking dog, and I'd be the weirdo neighbor who spies on people. I can't risk that. I can't risk them knowing I'm watching. The last 3 days have been a slow, grinding exercise in paranoia. Every little sound from next door sends a jolt through my system. The scrape of a chair, the clang of a dish, the creak of a floorboard. I've become an unwilling expert in the acoustics of Mr. Weatherby's house. I've started keeping the blinds on that side of my house closed, but it doesn't help. It almost makes it worse. It's like putting your hands over your ears when you know something is screaming. The silence is just as loud. Cromwell's rumble has changed. It's more frequent. It used to be this low, constant thrum, like a distant generator. Now it comes in short, sharp bursts. The kind of sound that makes the silverware in the drawer buzz. It sounds impatient. It sounds displeased. I've been trying to work, but it's impossible. I sit at my desk, which faces the window overlooking my backyard, and I just stare at the fence. It's just a plain cedar fence. Weathered gray with a few warped boards. But it feels like the wall of a cage now, and I'm not sure which side of the cage I'm on. Yesterday, I did something stupid. I had to know more. I waited until I saw Mr. Weatherby's old sedan pull out of his driveway. I watched it go down the street and disappear. I gave it 10 minutes, my heart hammering against my ribs, and then I went outside. My plan was to just look, maybe peek over the fence, see if there was anything unusual in the yard. The rumble started the moment I stepped onto my deck. It was louder than I'd ever heard it. It wasn't coming from one spot in the yard. It seemed to be coming from the house itself. The windows were dark, but the sound was vibrating through the walls, through the very air. It was a physical presence. My teeth ached with it. I walked to the fence, my steps feeling heavy and clumsy. The air was thick with the smell of raw meat. It's a smell that's always lingering around that property, but today it was ripe and cloying. The coppery scent of blood hanging heavy in the humid afternoon air. I found a spot where one of the boards was slightly warped, creating a small gap. My hands were shaking as I leaned in, putting my eye to the crack. I could see a slice of Weatherby's backyard, the patchy grass, the sad-looking rose bushes, the concrete patio. The patio was stained dark, almost black in places, and sitting right in the middle of the patio, staring directly at the back door, was Cromwell. He wasn't lying down. He was sitting up perfectly straight, like a soldier at attention. His posture was unnervingly rigid. His massive head was cocked slightly, as if listening to something inside the house. He was completely, utterly still. The only sign of life was the faint tremor in his jowls from the non-stop, house-shaking rumble that emanated from his chest. He looked like a statue of some ancient, malevolent god. I watched him for a few minutes, feeling like a spy in mortal danger. Then, the most terrifying thing happened. He moved, but he didn't just get up or turn around. His head, that enormous block of flesh and bone, rotated slowly, deliberately on his thick neck. It turned and turned and turned until his dark, obsidian eyes were staring directly at the crack in the fence I was looking through. There was no sound, no change in the rumble, just the silent, knowing gaze. It wasn't the dumb, vacant stare of an animal. It was intelligent. It was aware. It saw me. It knew I was there. And in those black, depthless eyes, I saw an ancient, bottomless contempt. It was the look a man might give an insect before he crushes it. I stumbled back from the fence, my breath catching in my throat. I felt a wave of pure, unreasoning panic wash over me. I ran back inside my house and locked the door, my heart feeling like it was going to explode. The rumble from next door stopped. The silence that followed was somehow more menacing. I spent the rest of the day in a state of high alert. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I felt those eyes on me, even through my closed blinds. When Mr. Weatherby's car returned a few hours later, I felt a bizarre wave of relief, which was immediately followed by more dread. The night was worse. I couldn't sleep at all, so I decided to set up a camera. I have an old DSLR that can shoot video. I positioned it on a tripod in my office, aimed it at my kitchen window, which has the clearest view of Weatherby's back door and patio. I hit record and just let it run, hoping to either capture something that would prove I'm not insane, or capture nothing and prove that I am. I must have fallen asleep at my desk around 3 a.m. I woke up an hour later, my neck stiff, the house silent. I went to the camera, my hands trembling, and rewound the footage. For the first hour, it was nothing. Just the still, moonlit scene, the empty patio, the dark windows. Then, at 2:17 a.m., Weatherby's back door slid open. No lights came on. A figure emerged. It was Mr. Weatherby. He was wearing his pajamas and a thin robe. He walked to the center of the patio, to the exact spot where Cromwell had been sitting earlier. He stood there for a moment, his head down. Then, he slowly, painstakingly, got down on his hands and knees. He lowered his head until his forehead was touching the cold concrete. He stayed like that, motionless, for 10 solid minutes. A small, frail man, bowing to an invisible king. Then he began to move. He crawled. He crawled around the patio in a slow, deliberate circle. He paused every few feet to press his face to the ground. It was a ritual, a penance, an act of worship. After he completed the circle, he crawled back to the center, stood up, and went back inside, sliding the door shut behind him. The patio was empty again. I don't know what I'm looking at. I don't know what kind of world I've stumbled into. This isn't just a man with a weird dog. This is something else. This is a religion, a cult of one. And his god is a silent, rumbling beast that lives next door. The camera is still set up. I'm going to keep it running every night. I have to know. I have to see what happens next. I feel like I'm at the edge of a cliff, and I can't stop myself from looking down. This is going to be the hardest part to write. I've been putting it off for a full day, just sitting here, staring at the wall. I've watched the video file maybe 100 times. Each time I watch it, the world feels a little less solid, a little more like a thin sheet of ice over a black, bottomless ocean. Some of you suggested I have a gas leak, or that I'm having hallucinations. I wish it were that simple. I bought a carbon monoxide detector the morning after I posted part 2. It's sitting on my counter, reading a cheerful, solid 0. This is real. It's happening. I kept my camera running just like I said I would. The night after I recorded Weatherby's ritual on the patio, nothing happened. A long, boring video of an empty, moonlit yard. I almost felt relieved. Maybe it was a one-time thing. Maybe I could start to forget. I even slept a little that night. But last night, the play on the stage next door reached its third act, and I was the only one in the audience. It started the same way. Around 1:30 a.m., I was at my desk, too wired to sleep, watching the live feed from the camera on my monitor. The feed was grainy, washed out in the camera's night vision mode, which made everything look even more spectral and unreal. A light clicked on in Weatherby's kitchen. My heart immediately started to pound. This was different. He never turned on lights. His house was always a black hole on the street. Through the window, I could see his kitchen. It was sparse, clinical, old linoleum floors, plain white cabinets. Then, the back door slid open. The hulking silhouette of Cromwell filled the frame. The dog, I have to stop calling it that, I don't know what it is, walked out onto the patio. It stood there for a moment, its massive form eclipsing the light from the kitchen. Then Mr. Weatherby appeared in the doorway. He was just standing there, in his thin robe. He looked smaller than ever, a fragile sketch of a man. He was trembling. I could see it even on the low-resolution video. Cromwell turned its head and looked at him. The deep, earth-shaking rumble started, but it had a new quality. It sounded like a question, a demand. And Mr. Weatherby, his face a mask of utter, soul-crushing despair, slowly got down on his hands and knees. He crawled out of the doorway and onto the patio, whimpering. He was making small, pitiful canine sounds. He crawled to the spot where he had bowed the other night, and he curled up into a ball, his face pressed to the concrete. I was glued to my screen, my mind screaming, refusing to process what I was seeing. And then it happened. The creature on the patio, the thing that looked like a mastiff, stood up. I'm not talking about a dog getting on its hind legs for a treat. This was not that. It was a slow, deliberate, unnatural unfolding. There was a sound, a sickening series of wet pops and clicks that the camera's microphone picked up with perfect clarity. It was the sound of joints and bones moving in ways they were never meant to. Its back legs straightened, lengthening, the hips rotating with a grinding crunch. Its front paws, thick and padded, splayed open, and the dew claws extended, becoming something horribly like thumbs. Its spine straightened, pushing the massive head and shoulders upwards until it was standing fully erect, a good 7 feet tall. It stood there in the doorway for a moment, a monstrous, top-heavy silhouette against the kitchen light. It rolled its shoulders, another series of those awful cracking sounds echoing in the night. It seemed to be getting used to the posture, like a man stretching after a long sleep. Then it turned and walked into the kitchen. Its gait was clumsy, jerky. It was bipedal, but it was new at it. It moved with the lurching, puppet-like motion of something trying to operate a body that wasn't its own. It walked over to a hook on the wall and took down Mr. Weatherby's beige cardigan. With its thick, paw-like hands, it clumsily, painstakingly pulled the sweater on over its massive shoulders. The fabric strained, threatening to rip. I was hyperventilating. My vision was starting to tunnel. I felt a scream building in my throat, but I couldn't make a sound. I could only watch. The creature, wearing the old man's cardigan, walked to the refrigerator. It opened the door with a fluid, surprisingly delicate motion. The camera caught a glimpse inside. It was packed, top to bottom, with bloody butcher paper-wrapped parcels of meat. It grabbed one of the largest parcels, kicked the fridge door shut with its leg, and carried the meat to the counter. It opened a drawer and fumbled around inside. The sound of rattling metal. It pulled out a large butcher knife. And then, under the stark, fluorescent light of the kitchen, the thing that used to be a dog started to prepare its meal. It tore the paper off the meat with its teeth. Then, holding the knife in its right paw hand, it began to chop. The movements were crude, inefficient. It held the knife like a club, bringing it down with excessive, violent force. It was hacking, not slicing. Chunks of raw meat flew across the kitchen. But it was trying. It was learning. It was mimicking an action it had seen before. The whole time, the man, Mr. Weatherby, remained curled on the patio in the dark, whimpering softly. The scene was so fundamentally wrong, so grotesquely inverted, that my brain felt like it was breaking. The man behaving like a dog, the dog behaving like a man. The master in his kennel, the pet in the kitchen. And then came the moment that will be burned into my memory until the day I die. The creature stopped its clumsy chopping. It went still, the bloody knife held aloft. Its huge head, still very much the head of a mastiff, with its wrinkled brow and drooping jowls, slowly turned. It turned away from the counter, past the back door where Weatherby was curled up, and it looked directly across the dark yard, through my kitchen window, and into the lens of my camera. There was no doubt. It wasn't a random glance. It looked right at me. It knew I was watching. It remained frozen for a long second, its obsidian eyes seeming to pierce through the screen and pin me to my chair. Then it did one last thing. It slowly raised its left paw, the one not holding the knife. It brought one of its long black claw fingers up to where its lips would be. It made the universal gesture for silence. Shh. And then it smiled. The jowls peeled back. The black lips retracted, pulling away from its teeth in a way that no dog's mouth ever could. It was not a snarl. It was a wide, deliberate, human-like smile. And the teeth underneath weren't a dog's teeth. They were too numerous, too uniform, too white. They were like a perfect, oversized set of human dentures. The smile was the most horrific thing I have ever seen. It was a silent statement of absolute power and chilling amusement. It was the smile of a predator that has just realized the creature hiding in the bushes isn't a threat, but a toy. It held that smile for 5 seconds. Then it turned back to the counter and resumed its chopping, as if nothing had happened. I scrambled away from the monitor. falling out of my chair. I crawled into the corner of my office, shaking uncontrollably. I finally found my voice, and the only sound that came out was a thin, strangled gasp. I have the file saved. It's on my laptop. I feel like it's a radioactive object. I haven't looked out the window since. The sun is up now, but it doesn't matter. The light doesn't make me feel safe. It knows I saw it. It knows I know, and it told me to be quiet. What do I do now? It's been a week. A long, sleepless, paranoid week. I appreciate all the suggestions, the warnings, the people telling me to get out of the house. I know that's the logical thing to do. Pack a bag, get in the car, and just drive until this town is a speck in the rearview mirror. But it's not that simple. For one, where would I go? I have a mortgage, a job, a life, or what's left of it. Running feels like admitting defeat, like letting it win. And a more terrifying thought has taken root in my mind. What if it doesn't matter where I go? What if a thing like that can find you anywhere? But the real reason I haven't left is fear. I am paralyzed by it. The act of packing, of opening my front door, of starting my car, it all feels like it would be too loud, like it would be an announcement. The little mouse is scurrying from its hole, and I'm terrified of what would happen then. So I stay. I hide. I watch. Life next door has returned to a horrifying sort of normal during the day. It's quiet. I see Mr. Weatherby shuffling to his mailbox or pulling a weed. He looks worse than ever. His skin is pale and waxy. His eyes are wide and sunken. He looks like a man being eaten from the inside out. He moves with a constant, nervous tremor. We made eye contact for a split second yesterday as he was taking out his trash. The look in his eyes wasn't anger or confusion. It was a desperate, pleading terror. He looked at me like a fellow prisoner on death row. Then he scurried back inside. The dog, Cromwell, is in the yard as usual, lying in the sun, exuding that bone-deep rumble. But it's different now. I know what I'm looking at. I'm not looking at a dog. I'm looking at a mask, a costume made of flesh and fur, and I can feel its awareness. I never see it looking at my house directly, but I know it's watching. The feeling is a constant, physical pressure at the back of my neck. The nights are the worst. The kitchen light in Weatherby's house no longer turns on. The performance is over, at least for now. I think it knows my camera is there. I think it's being careful. The silence is absolute. No rumbling, no whimpering, nothing. And it's 1,000 times more terrifying than the sounds were. It's the silence of a hunter that has gone perfectly still, waiting for its prey to make a mistake. Something new has started happening. Little things. Things designed to let me know that the fence between our yards is not a barrier. 3 days ago, I found a dead squirrel on my back deck. It wasn't mauled or bitten. Its neck was broken, a clean, professional snap. It was laid out perfectly in the center of the deck, its little paws crossed over its chest. A warning. A gift. 2 days ago, I woke up to find a single deep scratch in the paint of my car, running the entire length of the driver's side. It's too high up to be from a normal animal. It's about 5 feet off the ground, a perfect straight line gouged into the metal, a reminder of its reach. And last night was the most personal, the most violating. I have a wind chime hanging from the eaves over my deck. It was a gift from my mother. It's made of thin silver tubes that make a gentle, random music when the wind blows. I've always found it calming. I woke up this morning and looked outside, and it was different. The tubes were no longer hanging randomly. Someone or something had painstakingly arranged them, and tied them in place with thin black thread so they couldn't move. They were arranged in a pattern, a shape. It took me a few minutes to recognize it. It was a perfect, wide, grotesque smile. It had been in my yard. It had stood on my deck just feet from my back door. It had touched my things. It left me a message, a sculpture made of my own belongings, a mockery of my peace. I'm losing my mind. I feel like a rat in a maze and the walls are closing in. I've started barricading my back door at night with a heavy armchair. I know it's useless. If that thing can stand 7 feet tall, an armchair isn't going to stop it, but it makes me feel marginally better. I've also started digging, not literally, but online. I've been scouring old news archives, property records, anything I can find about this house, this neighborhood. The previous owner of my house was an elderly woman who died of a stroke. Nothing strange there. But the previous owner of Weatherby's house, I can't find anything. The records are murky. It seems like the property was vacant for a long time, owned by an out-of-state holding company. But I did find something else. A series of articles from about 15 years ago in the local paper's online archives. A string of missing pets. Cats, small dogs, all vanishing without a trace from a 2-block radius around my street. It went on for months. The police were baffled. Animal control put out warnings about coyotes, but the articles noted that no remains were ever found. The disappearances just stopped. About the same time, the property records for Weatherby's house get fuzzy. And then I found one more article, a small, human interest piece from a year before that, about a lonely, recently widowed man who had just moved to town. A retired accountant looking for a quiet life. His name was Arthur Weatherby. The article included a photo. He was smiling. It was a real smile, not the haunted, hollowed-out mask he wears now. The article mentioned his only companion was his new rescue dog, a large, quiet mastiff he'd named Cromwell. He didn't bring that thing here. He found it here. Or it found him. And I think it's been hungry for a long, long time. I think it got tired of squirrels and cats. I think Arthur Weatherby was the first real meal it had in years. Not his flesh, his life, his will, his identity. It consumed him, hollowed him out, and now wears him like a leash. I'm the first person in 15 years to pay attention, the first person to look too closely. And now, this patient ancient thing has a new toy to play with. I don't know what it wants from me, but the smile made of wind chimes feels like an invitation, or a final warning. It's telling me the game is starting, whether I want to play or not. The game has escalated. I feel like I'm living in a pressure cooker and the hissing is getting louder every day. The subtle warnings are gone. Now it's personal, it's psychological. It's trying to break me. 2 nights ago, my power went out. Just my house. The rest of the street was lit up like a Christmas tree. I went to the breaker box in my garage, flashlight in hand, my nerves screaming. All the breakers were fine. I flipped them all off and on again, but nothing. The house remained dark, silent. I called the power company, and they said there were no reported outages in my area. They promised to send a truck in the morning. I spent the night in the dark. Every creak of the house, every rustle of leaves outside, sounded like an approaching footstep. I sat in my living room, facing the back door, holding the heaviest kitchen knife I own. I didn't sleep. The power came back on at exactly 7 a.m., all by itself. I went to the main breaker on the outside of my house. The heavy metal lever had been physically pulled down into the off position. Something had stood in my side yard, reached out and plunged my world into darkness. The following day, things started to disappear. Small things I would second-guess myself about. My car keys were not on the hook where I always leave them. I found them in the freezer. A book I was reading was missing from my nightstand. It turned up under the bathroom sink. It's gaslighting me. It's moving through my house when I'm asleep, or in the shower, rearranging my reality, making me question my own sanity. Am I just losing my mind from stress, misplacing things? Or is it silently, invisibly walking my halls? I know the answer, but admitting it feels like a final surrender. The worst part is the sounds. It's learned to mimic. Late at night, I'll hear a faint tapping on my window. Not a branch. It's rhythmic. It's the sound of a single fingernail, or a claw tapping on the glass. Tap, 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 tap. I'll hear what sounds like my mother's voice, a faint whisper from another room, calling my name, Leo. My mother lives 3 states away. Last night it crossed the final line. I was in bed, drifting in that awful shallow sleep of the terrified when I heard it. A floorboard creaked downstairs. I went rigid, listening, my ears straining in the dark. Another creak, this time on the stairs. It was inside. My heart hammered so hard I thought it would break my ribs. I couldn't breathe. I was completely, utterly frozen in a primal animal terror. I lay there under my thin blanket, listening to the slow, heavy, wrong footsteps ascend my stairs. They were heavy like a large man, but there was a faint click with each step, the sound of a claw on the hardwood. The steps reached the top of the landing and stopped outside my bedroom door. I could see the sliver of light from the hallway being blocked by a large shape. It was standing right there. The silence stretched for an eternity. My entire world had shrunk to that closed door. I knew with absolute certainty that on the other side of that thin piece of wood, a 7-foot-tall monster wearing the skin of a dog was standing and listening. I could hear its breathing, a low, wet, guttural sound, like wind blowing through a cavern full of wet leaves. It smelled of damp earth and old blood. The smell was seeping under the door. I squeezed my eyes shut, tears streaming down my face. I was praying to a God I hadn't spoken to in a decade. Please just go away. Please, please, please. And then I heard a new sound. It was a voice that was a mockery of a human's. It was deep, raspy, and layered like 3 people speaking at once, all of them gargling gravel. It spoke one word, a distorted, mangled version of Mr. Weatherby's reedy tone. "Good boy," it rasped. And then it laughed. The laugh was not a sound of joy. It was a low, rumbling chuckle that vibrated through the floor. It was the sound of pure, malevolent amusement. It was the same emotion I had seen in its horrible human smile. It turned and walked away. The footsteps descended the stairs, and I heard my back door, the one I had barricaded, click softly shut. I lay there, shaking, until the sun came up. I checked the back door this morning. The armchair I'd pushed in front of it was back in its original place in the living room, perfectly positioned. The deadbolt was unlocked. There were 3 long, deep scratches in the wood of the door, right at eye level. I can't live like this anymore. I can't eat. I can't sleep. I feel myself fraying at the edges. Running is no longer a choice. It's a necessity. But how? It can get in my house. It can turn off my power. It can move through my rooms like a ghost. I think I have one last, desperate idea. I'm not just going to run, I'm going to set a trap. I have to see it clearly in the light. I have to get it on camera in a way that no one can deny. I have a couple of motion-activated security cameras I bought a while back but never set up. I'm going to put them up, aimed at my back door, aimed at my staircase. And I'm going to use bait. The one thing I know this creature understands. I went to the oldest, most run-down butcher shop in the next town over this morning. I paid cash. The man behind the counter gave me a strange look, but he took my money. I have a large, black contractor bag sitting in my kitchen right now. It's full of bloody scraps, beef hearts, and liver. It smells awful. Tonight, I'm going to leave my back door unlocked. I'm going to leave the bag on my kitchen floor. And I'm going to be upstairs, with my phone, watching the live feed from the cameras. This is either the stupidest or the bravest thing I've ever done. Maybe both. I have to get proof. If I don't make it, if this is my last post, I want the world to know what happened to me. I want the world to know what lives in that quiet suburban house. Wish me luck. I think I'm going to need it. The cameras are on. The bait is set. My hands are shaking so badly I can barely type this. I'm in my bedroom, door locked, a heavy dresser pushed against it. I know it won't hold, but it's a comfort, however small. I have the live feeds from the 2 cameras open on my laptop. One is aimed at the back door from across the kitchen. The other is at the bottom of the stairs, looking up. The house is dark. It's just after midnight. The waiting is agony. Every sound is magnified. The hum of the refrigerator. A car passing on the street. My own ragged breathing. What am I doing? This is insane. I'm inviting it in. I'm actively luring the monster into my home. But what other choice do I have? I can't live in this fear anymore. I'd rather face it and be done with it, one way or another. I'm looking at the feet of the kitchen. The black bag sits in the center of the floor, a lump of shadow in the grainy night vision. The glass of the back door reflects the empty night. It's so quiet. Too quiet. Even the crickets seem to have stopped. The whole world is holding its breath. Wait, I see something. A shadow moved on the patio, on the camera feed. Oh God. The handle on the sliding glass door is turning, slowly, silently. It's unlocked. Of course it is. Locks are just a suggestion to a thing like this. The door is sliding open. A dark shape is filling the doorway. It's huge. Much bigger than a dog. It's stooped over, as if to fit through the frame. It's in the kitchen. It's moving on all fours, but not like a dog. It's crawling like an insect, its limbs bent at sharp, unnatural angles. It's low to the ground, its huge head swinging from side to side, sniffing the air. The camera is picking up the sound now. That wet, rasping breath. It sees the bag. It's crawling towards it. It moves with a terrifying speed and silence. A giant spider made of shadow and muscle. It's circling the bag, sniffing it, rumbling low in its chest. The sound is making the microphone on the camera buzz. It's tearing the bag open with its claws. Not its teeth. Its claws. Long, black, curved things that slice through the thick plastic like it's paper. The smell must be filling the house. It's eating. Its head is buried in the bag. The sound of tearing flesh and cracking bone is sickeningly clear. I have it. It's on camera, clear as day. A monster in my kitchen. It's finished. It's lifting its head. Its face is covered in blood. And it's looking right at the camera. Its eyes are glowing faintly in the infrared light. It knows. It knew the cameras were here. This wasn't my trap. It was its. The bait wasn't for it. The bait was for me, to keep me here, to make me watch. It's standing up. The awful cracking of its bones. It's unfolding. Up and up and up. It has to duck its head to avoid hitting the ceiling. It's wearing the skin of Cromwell, but it's stretched, distorted. The fur is patchy, revealing pale gray skin underneath. It's looking at the camera at the bottom of the stairs. It's smiling that human-toothed smile. It's walking towards the stairs. I hear the first creak on the steps. It's coming. The camera feed for the kitchen is still on. I can see something else. The back door is still open. Another figure is crawling through. It's small, frail. It's Mr. Weatherby. He's on his hands and knees, wearing his tattered robe. He's crawling to the bloody mess on the floor, and he's starting to clean it up with his bare hands, whimpering. Another creak on the stairs. Closer. I can hear it breathing outside my door. That wet, cavernous sound. This was never about me. I was just an audience, an amusement. But the show is over, and it's time to meet the star. It's not Weatherby's dog. It never was. Weatherby is its dog, its pet, the one it keeps to clean its messes and show off its power. It's an old creature, and it has needs. A place to live. A steady supply of food. And a companion. The rumbling is inside my house now. It's shaking the floor under my feet. I think it's lonely. I think its last pet is getting old and worn out. I think it's looking for a new one.